Turn the car now. Michael's voice sliced through the silence like a blade. Claire, behind the wheel, flinched. She looked at her husband, confused, but something in his eyes made her obey without hesitation. She spun the steering wheel and made a U-turn. 3 seconds later, a deafening crash. A speeding truck collided with 2 cars, right where they would have been had they kept going. Shattered glass, distant sirens, muffled screams beneath the rain that had just begun to fall. Emily, their 8-year-old daughter, clutched the stuffed animal she'd won at the party and started to cry. Claire, her hands still trembling on the wheel, turned to Michael and asked, her voice barely audible, "How did you know?" Michael swallowed hard. He paused for a few seconds before finally replying, "Because I saw this accident days ago." What made Michael make that sudden decision, just seconds before the unthinkable happened? It wasn't luck, and it wasn't instinct. It was the result of something he had been carrying in silence for a long time. A secret that no one, not even Claire, knew. If you're ready to be surprised, stay with us. Because what he knew that night was just the tip of something much bigger. And it all begins long before that intersection. That night, Michael, Claire, and Emily were driving home from their daughter's 8th birthday party. They had spent a few hours in an upscale venue downtown, the kind of place frequented by the elite, with ice sculptures, waiters in white gloves, and an orchestra playing instrumental versions of Disney songs. It was a party for a child, but organized like a royal wedding, the bare minimum for the daughter of a billionaire. Michael wore the kind of expression that never truly disconnected from the world. Even surrounded by colorful balloons and children's laughter, his eyes seemed fixed on another dimension. Claire, his wife, had noticed this a long time ago. Ever since he'd built his fortune, Michael had become even more reserved, as if all that opulence was hiding something that hurt. Claire didn't come from wealth. She had been a public school teacher and met Michael before the money, when he was just a quirky programmer with scribbled notebooks full of improbable ideas. He was always different. Brilliant, yes, but also too sensitive. Sometimes he'd say things like, "Avoid the bridge tomorrow," or "Don't let Emily go to school today." At first, Claire thought it was paranoia, but over time, she realized something strange was happening, because he was always bright. But that night, Claire didn't have time to ask questions. What she saw in Michael's eyes was stronger than any doubt. It was fear, a deep, familiar fear. After the shock of the accident, she pulled into a closed gas station and asked, her voice trembling, "Tell me, how did you see that coming?" Michael ran a hand down his face and took a deep breath. Then, for the first time in years, he spoke about something he'd never had the courage to fully reveal. "I see things. Since I was a kid. Accidents, deaths, sometimes just images. Other times, just a feeling. I saw this crash days ago. I saw the cars, the truck. I saw you and Emily inside. I spent the whole week trying to forget, thinking it was just another nightmare. But when we got to that intersection, I felt it." Claire stayed silent. She didn't know what to say. It all felt like a movie, but the crash had just happened, and they weren't dead. They were alive, because she had trusted him. Michael had always lived with that silent curse, a secret he carried since childhood. In school, he would try to warn friends about small things, like, "Don't play soccer today," or "Don't take that street." And when something did happen, he was called weird, or worse, the cause of it all. His own father accused him of planting tragedy with his obsession for predicting misfortune. His family, poor, superstitious, and bound by rigid religious beliefs, said he was possessed. He was beaten, locked in his room for hours, called a freak. At 17, he ran away from home, got a scholarship to university, threw himself into the study of technology and finance with obsession. He wanted to understand the world rationally, to escape the visions, but fate seemed to mock him. The more he tried to forget what he saw, the stronger the images became. And on the day he ignored one of those visions, failing to warn a friend about a trip, that friend died in an accident. From that moment on, Michael never slept peacefully again. Claire listened in silence. The car was parked. Emily was asleep in the back seat, her golden party dress wrinkled, her face still smudged with makeup. In that moment, Claire understood she was married to a man who had spent his entire life trying to save others while carrying the guilt of those he couldn't. A man who became a billionaire trying to make up for what the world told him he could never change. A man who built a company that used data to predict social behavior because it was the only way to use his gift without being seen as crazy. A man surrounded by luxury, but with the wounded soul of a poor boy no one ever listened to. And that night, everything changed. Claire took Michael's hand. "You're not alone anymore. Now I know. And I believe you." Michael wasn't someone who cried easily, but his eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he felt like he didn't have to keep running from himself. But he hadn't told her everything yet. And what was coming next would make that night seem like just the beginning of a journey that was absurd, dangerous, and transformative. Because by trying to use his gift for good, Michael would awaken the most unlikely enemies, the very elite that had once praised him, the ghosts of his past, and an enemy within his own family. Hungry for power. After the night of the accident, Claire couldn't sleep. Her body was at home, but her mind was still stuck in that exact moment when Michael, in a low and cold voice, had said, "Turn the car, now." His whisper echoed in her head like a silent thunder. How did he know? That question pounded at her soul, but what disturbed Claire even more was the look on his face afterward, not relief, but pain, as if the accident had confirmed something he had been carrying on his shoulders for years. Always rational, Claire tried to search for logical explanations, but nothing made sense. The next morning, while Emily was still asleep, she decided to talk. Michael was in his office, eyes fixed on a folder filled with old documents. When she walked in, he looked at her as if he had known this moment would come. "There's something you need to know, Claire. Something I've hidden our whole life together," he said, his voice trembling. And there, in that silent room with high ceilings and solid wood furniture, the secret came to light. Michael told her that since childhood he had visions. They weren't dreams nor hallucinations. They were intense sensations, fragmented images, an unexplainable certainty about things that were yet to happen. At 5 years old, he told his mother that the family dog was going to run away, and the next day, the gate was wide open. At 9, he warned his uncle not to take the highway. A horrific crash occurred on that very road hours later. No one survived. At first, the family thought it was a coincidence, but as the episodes began to repeat, fear set in, and with fear came silence. My father said it was weakness, that a real man doesn't talk about feelings or premonitions. He forced me to shut up, made me feel ashamed, like I was crazy, Michael confessed, eyes filled with tears. Claire listened in silence. The shock was so overwhelming that she couldn't find her words. The image she had of her husband, the quiet billionaire, the rational business genius, was crumbling before her. But instead of fear, what she felt was something deeper, pity, and then compassion. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I tried to convince myself I'd left it all behind. But this week, I started having images, fragments of a car spinning, sirens, screams. I saw it happen, Claire, days before Emily's party. He knew. He had seen it. But what Claire didn't yet know was that this gift, or curse, had shaped Michael's entire life, including his rise to wealth. In the following days, she began to notice things she hadn't seen before. In Michael's office were sealed boxes with old notes, dates, names, places, an unofficial archive of past predictions, many of them confirmed, some tragic, others prevented just in time. Among the papers, she found something even more disturbing, records from the time when Michael's family was still poor. My father built an empire by crushing lives, Claire. He bought land with insider information, used political influence to silence entire communities. I tried to stop it, tried to warn people, but I was just a kid. And when I grew up, it was already too late. Michael explained that when he inherited his father's business, he didn't just inherit the fortune, but also the guilt and a silent mission to prevent more tragedies. In secret, he used part of the money to stop construction projects that endangered low-income neighborhoods, to fund rescue operations before environmental disasters occurred. But he had to do it quietly. If I told anyone, no one would believe me, or worse, they'd exploit me, destroy me. Then Claire understood why Michael, even as a billionaire, lived as if carrying an invisible cross. The secret that should have been a gift had become a prison. And for the first time, she didn't see him as her husband or a businessman, but as a broken human being trying to fix the world from the shadows. In the following days, something shifted inside Claire. That revelation awakened a new awareness about the privilege she lived in, and especially about the countless people who would never get a chance to survive tragedy if no one was paying attention to their pain. She was the one who suggested it. Michael, why don't you turn this into something bigger, an institute, something that could protect those who need it the most? Children, families who live without a voice, always on the edge. He hesitated, but she insisted, and for the first time in a long while, Michael listened. Over the next few weeks, the couple quietly launched a project, the Vortex Institute, a place that would provide protection and opportunities for children affected by social injustice, preventing disasters and discreetly intervening in situations of imminent risk. Using his abilities, Michael created sensitive area maps based on his perceptions. Claire, with her background as a teacher, developed educational programs connecting young people with mentors, psychologists, lawyers. The goal was clear: to break the cycle of tragedy before it could begin. But of course, not everyone was pleased with this initiative. The elite began to raise questions. Fellow billionaires wanted to know why Michael was funding non-profitable projects. Michael's brother, Sean, known for his insatiable ambition, confronted him openly. "You're going to throw it all away over a childish delusion?" Michael didn't respond, but Claire saw something in his eyes she had never seen before: true conviction. However, obstacles soon followed. Anonymous reports, trouble getting permits for the institute, subtle attacks from the media claiming Michael had gone insane. But the most painful blow came from within his own family. His mother, fragile from years of repression, begged him to stop, told him he was putting everyone at risk. Still, Michael pressed on. "If my father used his power to get rich by destroying lives, I'll use mine to save as many as I can." Meanwhile, the institute began to grow. Youth rescued from the streets started showing up. One of them, Jaden, 16 years old, was taken in after escaping a human trafficking ring. He was a quiet boy, but with intense eyes. Over time, Claire noticed that Jaden knew more than he let on. He started telling stories about powerful men manipulating tragedies for profit, about poor neighborhoods threatened by illegal developments, and about how the lives of ordinary people were always used as pawns in a much bigger game. Jaden's words struck deeply. And then came the final blow. One of Michael's visions revealed an imminent flood in a poor community on the outskirts of the city. They warned the authorities, asked for an evacuation, but no one listened. "False alarm," they said. 2 days later, the tragedy struck. 24 dead, hundreds left homeless. The shock was overwhelming. But Michael didn't retreat. On the contrary, it was at that moment that he made a public vow, even as the threats escalated. I will no longer hide. If I'm going to be attacked, let it be for trying to protect those who never had a voice. And in that choice, something shifted. The secret stopped being a curse. It became a mission. And that mission was just beginning. Sean, Michael's younger brother, grew up in his shadow. He always had everything money could buy, but never what he craved most: their father's admiration. While Michael was the sensitive genius, Sean was the default heir: ambitious, competitive, resentful. For years, Sean believed his brother's success was nothing more than luck, until he heard the secret: a prediction, a gift. That changed everything. If he knew all of this and kept it from us, Sean said during a call with a financial market investor, this could be a weapon. The word echoed. Meanwhile, Claire was fighting a different battle: social acceptance. Ever since the secret had come to light, some elite mothers began distancing their kids from Emily. At the club, whispers. At school, sideways glances. One even said, "Who's to say that family doesn't attract tragedy?" Claire felt a knot in her throat. That wasn't just prejudice, it was fear. And fear, she knew, makes people cruel. Trying to protect Emily, Claire went to talk to the school, but she didn't expect what she heard. "We understand the situation, Mrs. Walker, but perhaps it's time to consider a different environment for Emily. One that's more compatible with what your family is going through." She walked out with tears in her eyes. It felt like all their prestige, all their wealth, meant nothing in the face of a secret no one could understand. That same week, something even more terrifying happened. Emily disappeared. It was a quiet afternoon. Claire had stepped out to handle some tasks at the institute. Michael was in a meeting, and the nanny had taken Emily to the park. 5 minutes of distraction. When she realized, the nanny panicked. Little Emily was gone. Upon getting the call, Claire collapsed to the floor. Michael, upon hearing the news, didn't scream, didn't cry. He went silent. Then his eyes started to move, as if watching something no one else could see. "The railway warehouse," he whispered. "What?" Claire asked. "They're taking her there. I saw this before, months ago." The police were alerted, but Michael didn't wait. He and Claire went straight to the location from his vision, and they were right. Emily was there, tied up, scared, but alive. Beside her was Sean. "What are you doing?" Claire screamed. "I just wanted to understand how he does it. You see the future, don't you, Michael? Then tell me, are GulfTech shares going up or down? What about the European market, the JP Uran merger? Tell me." Michael closed his eyes. The ground felt like it was spinning. What had once been a silent curse was now an exposed weapon. His gift was being treated like a tool for manipulation. He didn't answer. Police arrived seconds later, and Sean was arrested. But the damage was done. The next day, headlines exploded. Billionaire claims to predict the future. Brother attempts to kidnap niece for insider information. Michael Walker's daughter abducted in a family scandal that shocks the elite. It was everything they feared. The secret was now front-page news. What had once been a silent gift had become an object of speculation, fear, and ridicule. "They're going to destroy us," Claire said, holding Michael. "They won't stop until you look like a lunatic, a threat." Michael remained silent. That night he had a vision, not of death, not of an accident, but of something much deeper. He saw his daughter, grown up, speaking to an audience. He saw tears in people's eyes. He saw applause, hope. Something was shifting, something was transforming. And then he understood. Pain wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new mission. A few days later, a woman named Rosa showed up at the institute. Michael remembered her, a girl he had once tried to help through a vision, but whose family had been driven out of town by prejudice. Now an adult, Rosa was a social worker, and she offered help. "I know what it's like to be disbelieved for being different. I know what it's like to have no one. But you're not alone. The people still stand with you." That was the spark they needed. Michael called a meeting with the Institute's volunteers. He expected a handful of people. More than 200 showed up, from doctors to former homeless people. Poor, wealthy, forgotten, even some ashamed business leaders. They all said the same thing. "Your difference has saved lives. Don't give up." That's when Claire, for the first time, took the lead. "This gift was never a weapon. It's a responsibility, and we'll use it to rebuild, not to hide." Victory seemed finally within reach. Emily was slowly smiling again. The Institute, despite the threats, was gaining even more popular support. And Michael, though still shaken, was starting to transform his pain into purpose. But there was still one final challenge. A new bill, quietly proposed by a group of politicians aligned with the financial elite, aimed to regulate unverifiable activities linked to premonitions and public influence. In practice, they wanted to silence Michael, shut down the Institute, declare his gift a public threat. The shock was immense. Claire looked at him and said, "They'll call you unstable, a manipulator. They'll try to silence you. But what if now is when you need to speak louder than ever?" Michael looked at his daughter and remembered the vision. Maybe that future would only be possible if he had the courage to act in the present. And that's exactly what he decided to do. The days that followed felt like a countdown to ruin, or to rebirth. Michael knew the bill being pushed through in secret wasn't just about him. It was about control, about silencing those who could see what the powerful tried to hide. But for the first time, he wasn't thinking only about his own survival. He was thinking of Emily, of the hundreds of children and families who had found shelter thanks to the gift he once tried to suppress. It was time to tell the truth on national television. Claire was the one who arranged it, a live, unedited interview on the country's most influential network. Social media exploded. News headlines speculated, billionaire to reveal what he knows about the future? Gift or illness? The truth behind Michael Walker. Michael wore a simple suit. No brands, no showiness. He sat in front of the cameras, took a deep breath, and began. "All my life, I tried to silence what I saw, because the world doesn't accept what it can't understand. But it's time to stop hiding. What I have isn't a superpower, it's not a curse. It's sensitivity, it's connection, and above all, it's responsibility." He spoke about each vision, about the tragedies he tried to prevent, the times he failed, the lives he saved, the pain he carried for not being able to save them all. He spoke about Emily, about Sean, and by the elite's attempts to buy his silence. And then he paused. "They want to declare me unfit, shut down the Institute, maybe even institutionalize me. But I'm not here asking for mercy. I'm asking for courage. Courage to look at those who are different, and instead of destroying them, to try and understand." The nation stopped to watch. The impact was immediate. By the next day, social media was flooded with personal stories, ordinary people saying, "I feel things I don't understand too." The world needs more sensitivity, not less. What they're doing to him is what they do to everyone who refuses to be a robot. The movement had a name. #ISeeItToo. Teachers, doctors, artists, even a few politicians began to speak out. It was as if Michael's secret gave others permission to take off their own masks. And in the middle of it all, Emily. She began to speak in public with the simplicity of a child, but the strength of someone who had seen too much. She said, "My dad's not magic. He just listens to his heart more than most people do. And I want to learn how to listen to mine too." The public pressure was so great that the bill was withdrawn. In its place, a new proposal emerged, the creation of a multidisciplinary council to study with ethics and science human sensitivity as a tool for social care. Michael was invited to lead it. At the first international conference on the topic, he stepped onto the stage with Claire and Emily. Thousands stood to applaud, and when he began to speak, he didn't use stats or academic quotes. He just told a story. Once I was just a boy who saw too much. I was called crazy, weak, strange. But when I found my family, I understood. I didn't need to change who I was. I just needed to belong. Silence. Then, an applause that seemed to never end. In the audience, a gray-haired woman wept. It was Rosa, now the coordinator of a new emotional support program for underserved communities. Beside her sat several young people who had once slept on the streets and who now had a home. That night, Michael returned home with Emily asleep in his arms. He looked at Claire and smiled. When all this started, I just wanted to be normal. She caressed his face and replied, "But it was because you weren't that you changed the world."
Years had passed since the day Michael Walker stood before the world and decided to no longer hide who he was. His name had become a symbol. The Institute had grown, opening branches in dozens of countries. Stories that were once silenced were now being told and finally made sense. But time moves on, and even the man who foresaw so many destinies was not prepared for one thing: the outcome of his own journey. Emily was now 21. Her once light hair had darkened. Her eyes, still gentle, held a depth that only comes from silent suffering. Since childhood, she had known she was different. She didn't see images like her father did, but she felt things. She felt when something was wrong before it happened. She felt pain that wasn't hers. She dreamed of people she had never met, and days later, found them in unexpected places. Michael, with his quiet wisdom, never forced her awakening, but he never denied it either. If it's meant to happen, it will. And when it does, you'll know. It happened on a rainy night. Emily was driving home from a lecture, alone. On the passenger seat lay a letter she had found among the Institute's old archives. It was addressed to her father, but had never been opened. Written in shaky handwriting and dated 25 years ago, the sender was a name Emily didn't recognize: Sophie T. At the traffic light, something strange occurred. The world seemed to slow down. A red light glowed brighter than normal. And then, the sound vanished. Emily looked in the rearview mirror. A car was speeding toward her. She took a deep breath and turned the wheel just seconds before the collision. It was close. And in that instant, everything clicked. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a calling. A door had opened. Michael picked up the phone, and before Emily said a word, he murmured, "It happened, didn't it?" Through tears, she replied, "I felt it, Dad, the way you used to feel." Silence. I'm scared, but also at peace. Michael smiled on the other end and said, "Now it's your turn." The next day, Emily returned to the Institute, alone. She wanted to visit the first building, the one her father had renovated with his own hands. In the basement, she found the old archive, and there, among so many stories, she opened Sophie T's letter. The message was brief, but it changed everything. "Michael, I didn't know if I should write, but I'm pregnant, and I don't want you to hear it from someone else. I don't want anything from you. I just needed you to know." Emily felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. Sophie. Who was she? She ran to her father's office, searched through the files, until she found a single old photo, yellowed with age. A boy, strikingly similar to Michael, hugging a dark-haired woman with a sad gaze. On the back of the image, an inscription: Sophie and Paul, 2000. Paul, the boy from the visions, the child Michael had seen dying in a fire. But what if he hadn't died? Emily confronted her father that very night. Michael was in the garden, watering the plants, a habit he kept even after being known as the billionaire of visions. She handed him the letter without a word. Michael read it silently. He didn't make excuses. He didn't run. He said, "I was young, cowardly. I met her long before I met your mother. She left without saying anything. When I had the vision of the fire, I tried to find her, but it was too late. All I had left was regret." "What if he's alive, Dad?" Emily asked, eyes brimming with tears. "What if Paul is out there, not knowing who he is?" Michael looked at her with sorrow. "Then maybe it's your mission to find him." The months that followed were a quiet journey. Emily traveled across the country, searching for clues. She investigated shelters, schools, hospitals. She used the Institute's resources, but most of all, she used something that couldn't be measured: her intuition. At an old orphanage in the countryside, she found a name: Paul T. Thompson. A reserved young man, volunteer in social projects, he never knew who his parents were. He was 27, and he had Michael's eyes. Emily didn't say anything. She just watched him for days, until one day he turned to her and asked, "Do I know you?" She smiled, holding back tears. "Not yet, but I think we're about to meet." That night, Emily wrote a letter to her father. "Dad, I found him, and he's everything you hoped for. He doesn't need a billionaire. He needs a brother. And I need a purpose. I think I found it now." Michael read the letter and cried. Not out of pain, but of release. In the following months, Paul and Emily became inseparable. She helped him understand all that had been hidden from him for so long, and he, with his simple and observant nature, brought to the Institute a new way of seeing the world. No visions, no predictions, just compassion. Together they created a new branch of the project, the Circle of the Invisible, welcoming those who had never had a voice, but had a soul. Michael stepped back from leadership. He began to write. He published a book titled The Future is Not a Place, in which he wrote, "Life is not about prediction, it's about belonging, about loving even without understanding, about being a lighthouse even when your own light flickers." In a symbolic event, Michael officially passed the leadership of the Institute to Emily, and Paul, by her side, was named coordinator of the new division. In front of a moved audience, Emily said, "My father always thought his greatest gift was seeing the future, but his greatest gift was something else, loving the truth even when it hurt, and that he taught me through his life." She looked out to the crowd, holding the hands of Michael and Paul, and added, "May we never be afraid to feel, because that's how we change the world, not with predictions, but with presence." Applause, tears, silence. The legacy was sealed. Now the family is at peace. Michael and Claire spend their afternoons watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Emily and Paul make plans to help more young people and their families. They all know how much it costs to get there. But now, finally, the past can rest and the future has begun. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel, because every great journey deserves to be told, and you are part of this transformation.